Okay, so sort of some additional sort of things about the Nile River. This is the same slide. I went to the next one. No, I think that slide's sort of a duplicate, so we'll go on. Okay, so remember that I said in the lower Nile region that there was a city there that we were going to be looking at called Saqqara, right? And Saqqara was a huge necropolis. It's near the city of Memphis, which was one of the two early cities, Memphis and Thebes. And it started dating, it dates back to about 3200 BCE. Okay? So it's ancient. I mean, it's ancient. A necropolis comes from, a necropolis is essentially a giant cemetery, but the way that they looked at it, it was a city of the dead. And that's what necropolis means. Nekros, right, means dead in Greek, and polis means city. So necropolis is a city of the dead. Okay? The early tombs of the rulers were called mastabas. All right? And mastaba in Arabic means something like bench or stool. And what they were these little sort of mud-sided blocks, right? They looked like a stool for a giant, for example. All right, and they were about 30 feet in height, and they were the first sort of models. They had leaning in sides for the pyramids. Okay, so the typical pattern of arrangement would be that there would be this block up above, and there'd be a subterranean chamber down below. It would have storage rooms so that the dead king could eat, or queen. And then there was also usually some sort of a chapel or state chamber with an effigy of the ruler in the chapel. All right? Take this as sort of a plan view of Saqqara, and you can see just how many different mastabas and one of the complexes that we'll be looking at, which is the Pyramid of Zoser. Okay? Here's a cut-through view of a mastaba. Mastabas essentially are these little blocks, right? And they've got the chambers inside of them. I've got a better view of it, but you can see that there's this thing that's above ground. Then there's this like tunnel that goes way down to a chamber below, which is where the burial chamber is, and there's areas up inside of them. All right? Take a look. Here's a better sort of view of it. You get an idea of where they might bury somebody. The fact that they would build walls to kind of block people off from getting in there. And then the actual mastaba on top, and then the chapel and the effigy of the ruler on top. Here's an actual view of what a mastaba would look like. You can see the tapering sides. You can see that it's made from blocks of stone. This all eventually leads to the first pyramid. So that doesn't look like the pyramids that we're used to seeing, right? I mean, that looks like kind of a mud block, you know, just sort of there. It's a box. So along comes this guy named Zoser, pronounced Zoser, but spelled Djoser, okay? And Zoser decides to build a huge pyramid. And he's building this while he's alive. So these guys are planning for their death, right? And they're planning to be these kings in the afterlife. And so they have to build themselves these palaces for the afterlife. And so in the development of the Pyramid of Zoser, we see this transformation that's going to occur from that simple little block thing to a very large pyramid. It is a stepped pyramid, but a pyramid nonetheless. Okay? His sort of take on this thing comes from a mastaba, and then another mastaba being added to it, and more mastabas being added, and then it wasn't big enough, and so they started stacking them on top of each other, and eventually they stacked it way the heck up. Okay? Some of the key things to note inside of it is that it's a complex. It's not just a pyramid. Okay? It is a whole bunch of buildings inside of a walled city of sorts. And that in this complex, we see the first use of monumental columns. So when you guys think of ancient architecture, right, you think of buildings with columns, right? Our Capitol building, you know, many of the sort of buildings that are part of our government have these big columns. Those columns are predominantly related to the Greeks and the Romans. This predates them, and this is the first sort of culture that actually starts to use this idea of the column for something more than just supporting something on a wood stick. Okay? This is also the first place that we see capitals. That is, something at the top of the column to both distribute load and to act as an ornamental top to this vertical element. Okay? So there is also a symbolic content to this pyramid of Zoser that you guys have to take into consideration, and that's that these things, this pyramid was going to be viewed as a stepping stone to heaven. Okay? And so it aims to get higher and higher in the sky, right, as a means of getting closer to heaven. So here we see a couple of views of the pyramid. Each view has different sort of components to it, but one of the things that I want you guys to be aware of is that there's this walled city all the way around it. So these are walls that were built up. This portion over here was solid. You see the location of the actual pyramid, and then you see that there's another mastaba at the other end. There's courtyards. There are additional burial chambers for the wives of Zoser and some of other important people. There are multiple courtyards. All right. If we look at this area over in here, one of the things that I want to bring to your attention is this little thing here called the serdab. It's a little tiny block building. I think I have a picture of it somewhere. And inside that little block is a giant pyramid of Zoser, and there's just this little tiny hole, right? And Zoser's in this dark chamber staring out of this hole, the effigy of him. All right? A couple of other things that I want you to be aware of as we move forward through this thing is this Hebshed court, right? So be aware of that area and the sort of modular character of the repetitive pieces that you see here. And then this other entrance thing, this orange part. Okay? Because these are places where we're going to see parts of architecture that are starting to get to a level of refinement that didn't exist before this. A 3D view, this shows that entrance court, right? And it shows all of that other court that had these modular elements, and then you see the pyramid in the background. One of the things about this image is that you see the walled sort of city, right? And there are 15 gates that lead into this walled city, but only one of them is functional. All the other ones are blocked. And they were blocked from day one. So the idea, or one of the theories is that they were blocked to confuse people from coming in and stealing what was there. That's one. A different thought was that the gates essentially led the spirit of the dead king, of dead Zoser, to different portions of his kingdom. So they pointed out to the different parts of the kingdom. The functional one is here, but you can see that there's a lot of them. There's a gate, there's a gate, there's a gate, there's a gate, there's another one, another one. You look around and there's 15 total all the way around, but only one of them goes in. And the one that does go in goes in essentially through this building, the long, skinny building. Okay? Taking a look at the actual pyramid and its transformation, we see the original mastaba 1 and 2, right? So those look like big mastabas, right? Compared to the little block one we saw earlier. So one wasn't enough, so they built the second one. The second one wasn't enough, and so they started to build more around it, right? That wasn't enough, and so they started to go up. So here's the transformation from this little block mastaba to a pyramid, right? That pyramid wasn't enough, and so they built another one over top of it. It essentially created the final pyramid. And this stepped pyramid is the predecessor to what's on some of our currency, right? If you look on the back of our currency, there's a pyramid there. So here's an actual view, and here you see those modular pieces. This is inside of the walled area, right? And so here you see the modular elements and the stepped pyramid in the background. A little bit further forward, sort of over this way, would be where that entrance court is. And so we'll take a look at the entrance court momentarily. There's a different view of it. Okay. As part of this complex, we see the first use of a column that doesn't do anything. Right? This wall is fully capable of supporting whatever you put on it, right? Why do you need a column? Well, this is the first time that we see the use of the column as a sort of heroic effort to punctuate something, to express something. All right? The columns are attached to the wall. They don't really function. They don't really need to be there to function. And so that entrance chamber that I was telling you about, the part that was orange down the bottom, this is a pictorial view of it. And once again, you see there's a wall here, and there's a wall here, right? And then there's a column at the end of each wall. And that's exactly what's going on down this whole row. There's a whole series of walls with a column on the end. Now, most people can conceive of the fact that you really didn't need the column, right, if you had a wall that close to the other side. But the columns become this sort of monumental expression of an approach to something. They create this cadence along a linear path that repeats and repeats and repeats and repeats. You'll see that original thought there transposed and essentially replicated throughout classical history. All right? So, taking a closer look at Lower Egypt. Now, understand that Saqqara is in Lower Egypt, but I chose to kind of talk about the pyramid, the transformation and the development of the pyramid before we get to the classical pyramids. Okay? So here is a close-up view of the Nile Delta and the lower valley. There's the city of Memphis, Saqqara right across from it, Giza, and Cairo, all in this sort of very close proximity at the top of the delta. Okay? So if there was going to be an area that flooded, it was going to be from the delta down. Okay? From above there, the river pretty much was contained within its river valley. So after Zoser, right? And Zoser, let's put him about 1,500 years before this, or about 3,000. No, let me back up. Oh, I'm out of time. All right, before I leave this, I'm gonna back up to Zoser and see if I had a time period for him. Nope. I will have to find a time period. All right. Let me stop this and we'll start a new one.